Anyway.
That's great. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, April 24th, end of the day. I will call this meeting to order. And I'm going to hand it over to Troy to give some instructions for today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because we do have a public hearing today, we will be translating this meeting simultaneously. And so we'll be enabling simultaneous translation on the Zoom webinar for those that are participating online. We also have interpreters that'll be available here in the room for those that need it. And so after me, there'll be some instructions in Spanish, and then we'll enable the translation, and then we can continue with the meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Hola, buenas tardes. Yo soy Cristina de parte de Lingüística, Interpretación, Interpreting. Vamos a estar proveyendo interpretación simultáneamente en línea y en persona esta tarde. Así que para la audiencia pública también se va a dar la interpretación si quieren participar. Instrucciones para cómo conectarse en español a la interpretación. Si están conectados desde una computadora o tableta, va a ver el icono del mundo en la pantalla inferior que dice interpretación. Seleccione su idioma de preferencia, que será en este caso español. Luego dele clic a silenciar audio original y póngale down o finalizar y va a estar configurada la interpretación de Zoom.
Okay, with that, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready for it?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we will have public comment. This time is made available for comments from the public on matters within the board's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Attention is called to the fact that the board is prohibited by law from taking any substantive action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda, and no adverse conclusions should be drawn if the board does not respond to the public comment. It is requested that no comments be made during the period on items that are on today's agenda. Members of the public may comment on any item that is on today's agenda when the item is called and should notify the chairperson of their desire to address the board. Do we have any public comment?
We're not online, we have not received any.
I'm going to, because of a timing issue, we are going to jump to MCTC sitting as the Madera County 2006 Transportation Authority, item 9. Administrative consent items, there are none. So we will go with item 10. And that is the Madera County Transportation Measure Tracking Survey Results and Measure Fee Renewal Update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll first hear from Dave Metz with FN3. He will be providing us with the survey results, the Measure T survey results that were conducted this month, April. And then we'll move into a presentation by Kendall, the DKS, and she'll provide us with a presentation on the status of the current Measure T renewal and the steering committee and next steps, and she'll provide us with some next steps. So with that, I'm not sure, Kendall, if you were going to do an introduction or should we just go ahead and switch to
Just for context, to remind the board, this is the survey. This is the second of 2 surveys. We did 1 survey last fall. This is a follow-up survey. The difference between the 2 was in this particular one, we tested some things that the steering committee had come up with. So as an example, the steering committee was really more interested in a 75% allocation for local streets and roads. There was going to be an end to the measure as a sunset date. We were also taking a look at the allocation within the agencies. Currently, that's done by population. We polled on whether it should be population or sales tax. It's a shorter poll, but I'm going to refer it over to Dave Metz. He can give you the results. They are quite promising, but I'll refer Dave to give you a headline on that, and then I'll follow up what happened yesterday at steering committee.
All right, thank you very much. So it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm Dave Metz with FM3 Research, and I'm going to present the results of our tracking survey as Kendall just described. I will say that the results are very encouraging. In many regards, they are similar to the baseline survey that we conducted in September, which show that we start with about 2/3 of voters indicating a willingness to vote for a Measure T renewal. As they hear more about the measure, how it's designed, how the money would be spent, the benefits it would provide, that support goes up over 70%. So well over the 2/3 threshold that would be required for approval. There is also a continued majority that supports the measure, even after they're exposed to some of the things that opponents might say. But maintaining support at that 2/3 level is a little bit of a challenge. And I think it underscores the importance, if you choose to move forward with putting a measure on the ballot, of having some public education and outreach to make sure that voters understand that this isn't a tax increase, understand the kinds of services and improvements to the transportation system that it will fund, and also recognize that unless the tax is renewed, funding is actually going to be cut, and we're going to have less dollars available to address transportation needs than we do today. An understanding of all those points, I think, leaves us in a position where most county voters are supportive and believe it will be a good idea to renew Measure T. So with that overview, we'll go in and talk about the details of the survey. The methodology of the research is very similar to what we did last September. We talked to just over 640 voters countywide who were considered likely to cast a ballot in this November's election based on their past voting behavior. We used a mix of phone and online interviews, talking to voters on both landline and cell phones, and then using both email and text message invitations to invite them to participate in an online survey. And interviews were done in both English and Spanish. So the opening question in the survey is just designed to understand the mood of Madera County voters. And as you'll see here, about 1/3 believe that things in the county are headed in the right direction. About 1/3 think that they're on the wrong track. The rest are sort of ambivalent or say they don't know. Those sentiments are very similar to what we saw last fall, so no major changes in the overall mood of the electorate. We then tested a revised version of the potential ballot questions, which, as Kendall noted, includes some of those new provisions, like the requirement for 75% of funding to be for local roads, and detailing all of the financial impacts of the extension of the tax, as is required by law, while also making clear that this is not an increase in the tax rate. Given that language, and again, this is what voters would see on their ballot, which is the most important factor for them in making up their minds about how they would vote, because it's the only piece of information we know that every voter will have before they vote. As you'll see on the right-hand side of this slide, 67% of voters tell us they would vote yes, 28% tell us they would vote no. Those numbers are statistically identical to what we saw in our September survey. And obviously, when you have a 2/3 threshold for approval, we are right at that threshold. Only 5% of voters undecided at this point. There's a sizable number of voters here who are tentative in their position, about 1/3 who say they'd only probably vote yes or are leaning toward doing so, while 34% are definite supporters. And again, one of the benefits of public education and outreach is, to the extent that those voters have questions or uncertainties about the impacts of the measure, the more information you can give them to resolve those questions, the more comfortable they're likely to feel in their decision. We looked at a number of demographic breakouts within the Madera County electorate to just understand how subgroups react to the measure. And you'll see here there's a lot more similarities than differences. We have 2/3 support from both men and women, from both white voters and Latino voters. And while there is more support from Democrats, as there is usually for just about any tax measure, we do have support from 66% of independents and 58% of Republicans. And I think the key here is that this is not a tax increase, but a continuation of the existing tax. Geographically, we also have support for the measure that extends across all 5 supervisorial districts within the county. At least 60% support in all 5, and most of them at 2/3 or higher. And then at the bottom of this slide, relatively little difference when we look at different levels of expected voter turnout. Even when we get to some of the most high propensity voters, support is only a few points lower than it is among those who are more occasional voters. And obviously with a presidential election, turnout is expected to be quite high in November relative to other election dates. We also asked the respondents to rate the importance of a variety of different ways that funding from the measure might be used. We used a 4-point scale of either extremely, very, somewhat, or not too important. The numbers that are running down the right-hand side of the slide are the total that rated each item as either extremely or very important. Those are typically the numbers we put the most emphasis on because it suggests a real sense of urgency behind each of these spending categories. And keeping in mind that we start out with 67% support, and that's the level of support that the measure would need to be approved. All but 2 of the items that we tested here are ones that more than 2/3 of voters rate as being very important. So there's a bunch of voters who are initially opposed or undecided who are hearing about some of these potential investments and saying, yeah, that's something that's important to me, especially the things that you see at the top of the slide, keeping local streets, highways, and road and infrastructure in good repair, fixing potholes, and paving and maintaining local streets and roads. That priority, road conditions, is overwhelmingly the thing that matters most to Madera County voters. And again, I think having that ballot question that says that that's where 75% of the money is going to go aligns very neatly with what voters see as the highest transportation priority. We also had a question asking voters about how the money might be distributed. And noting that the current system for distributing the money is based on population, and asking voters whether they would prefer to shift that to basing distribution of funding on how much sales tax revenue is generated in each jurisdiction. And what you'll see here is that by a 44-28 margin, voters generally prefer continuing with the current funding allocation. That preference is consistent across most demographic subgroups within the county. But to be fair, there's a sizable number of voters who simply don't have a strong opinion on this issue. It's obviously a level of detail that I think most voters may not be completely attentive to, but there isn't a broad constituency for changing the way that the money is distributed. So the final part of the survey briefly tested pro and con arguments that voters might hear from supporters and opponents of the measure, just to give us some sense of how fluid levels of support are as the kind of community conversation that we would expect unfolds. We tested the argument in favor that you see listed here. Again, it highlights some of the structural changes in the measure that the steering committee recommended and notes in some detail the urgency of transportation improvements that are needed in Madera County. We also tested an opposition argument where we tried to accurately represent the kinds of things that opponents might say, talking about high cost of living, other sources of investment like the federal government, the notion that voters rejected the extension of the tax in a previous election, and asserting that there's enough money in the system already to address transportation needs without extending the tax. So here you'll see how support for the measure shifted after voters heard each set of arguments. We start out with 67% of voters saying they would vote yes. That moves up to 72% after they heard the argument in favor. More meaningful, though, is the change in that dark blue bar at the top of the slide, the proportion who say they would definitely vote yes. That goes from 34% up to 44%. So a number of those supporters who I noted at the outset are tentative in their position become much more firmly convinced to support the measure. The no vote also goes down by 6 points. The opposition message does reduce support. There's still a broad majority that are in favor of renewing Measure T at 57-36, but obviously with the measure needing 2/3 support, it's below that level. So that shifting that we see from voters, I think, underscores the importance of making sure that voters understand how the measure is designed in ways that, based on the survey, align with their needs and desires, and again, that this is not a new tax. So the bottom line conclusions of the survey are summarized on this slide. And again, I think it's very consistent with what we saw in the September polling and suggests that the measure is viable for the November election, but it is going to require some communication and education to the public to make sure they understand how the measure is designed and again, the fact that they're not going to be asked to pay more than they are currently paying. So I'll pause there. Kendall, if there's anything you'd like to add, please do, and otherwise happy to answer questions.
No, thank you very much, Dave. Unless the board has any questions, what I'd like to do is move into the presentation of what happened at the steering committee and then open it up for questions for both because they relate, if that's okay with the board.
One question on that slide, Dave, is the proponent side of it. It started off with fixing potholes and what have you. Does that elaborate on the fact that it's not a new tax? I mean, should it not start there? I mean, I think, I'm not saying that that's what people want to see. I'm sure they want to see that this measure, you know, obviously take care of the repairs, safety improvements and what have you, but I guess it's at the bottom, right?
Yes, I think it's a fair argument to say that you could reverse the order of these two paragraphs. I think both of those things are important for people to hear. This is not a new tax, and it is going to direct funding to the thing that you believe is the highest priority, which is fixing the roads.
And I think that that message in itself, I mean, you start reading something about taxes, if somebody already has a negative thought process, just the fact that it's a measure means taxes, and I'm not even gonna read the other paragraph, I'm just gonna go with no. And I don't know, man, so I look at certain things, right? I'm not saying necessarily here locally, but initiatives that may not pertain to us here in the valley. So I'm just throwing that out there.
So yeah, that's a fair point. And obviously there's going to be lots of other measures on the ballot, state, local, regional schools that are tax increases. And so distinguishing this one and making clear that this one isn't, I think you're absolutely right that that's sort of job one.
And maybe those probably know after they read that second negative one, they may not see it as harmful as what they think it is, right? This is gonna be taxes, I don't want this. So those are my comments, thank you.
Go ahead, Kendall.
Dave, hang on if you can, because there may be other questions in the context. So we're setting up just the PowerPoint to give you the update on the Measure T outreach and everything else. I'm just waiting for my piece there. She'll have it in just a moment. But I am rarely surprised in this particular line of work. And I have to say that yesterday I was shocked. So it's a happy shock. I have to say that it was a very happy shock. Number of the things that Dave mentioned, I just need to bring to the attention of the board, are different based on the outcome of yesterday's meeting, and I'll get to that in just a second. But just a reminder, we did have a series of town hall meetings, and thank all of you who helped us put those together. Some were better attended than others, but they were consistent in the fact that everyone that attended consistently said that the thing they were most interested in was local street and road maintenance and things that were happening in their communities, as opposed to regional types of things. Throughout this process, we also had an opportunity to talk with folks in multiple languages. So for example, in Fairmead and Lavina, we were both doing those in Spanish. We had opportunities to really get further into it. What I think is really interesting is that our website has had almost 1,000 people go onto it and weigh in on their pieces. And consistently what they're telling us again is they're prioritizing what we heard in the polling, which is basically local streets and roads, local streets and roads, local streets and roads. Now, we did hear, you noticed in the polling data, when it comes to District 5, there's definitely some concern about evacuation routes, but that's not the same in other. And I think that's been really good for the steering committee because I think the plan they came up with is actually quite innovative and addresses a lot of these concerns. And I'm going to share more with that in a moment. But again, we're able to capture all this information and sharing it with the steering committee. And yesterday, they finished an hour and 10 minutes early, and they had a unanimous vote. And when I say unanimous, that means everyone, including our friends from District 5, District 1, every district, vocally, audibly said that they supported the plan as was developed. Why this is important is because we have opposition that came up in the last time that had some very specific reasons. So I'm going to run through where they're at with this. I cannot emphasize enough the commitment that the board has made, and what they're banking on is that this board is going to accept their recommendation and move forward with it. But you'll see that what they're asking, what they're suggesting is consistent with the polling data, what we heard in the workshops, what we heard online. So there's a much bigger body of outreach that has contributed to this. I think, first of all, they opted for a 20-year measure. There was discussion about a 30, but let me tell you why they went to 20. Representatives from Sierra Citizens attended the Republican Party meeting this week on Monday, and basically told the group that, in their opinion at that time, that they would be supportive of a measure if it was 20 years. And despite the fact that many of our committee members really supported 30 years, we shared that information with them, with the idea that, like a lot of these other negotiations, it is a negotiation. So if you can get a bigger tent and more people on board, we might think 20. And so we went from having a divided room to, we're going for 20 years. Would other people like 30? Maybe, but 20 seemed to be the thing based on some of those comments. Now, the distribution is also different. And this addresses two things. One, the things that we heard from the public, but also ongoing complaints and ongoing concerns that we've heard from a number of advocates within our county that wanted to see some sort of a carve out for some of our disadvantaged communities like Lavina and like Fairmead, and they wanted it in writing. So what we came up with, and I think that so proud of the committee, which by the way has members from all walks of life, but in this particular case, we have 80% now going to local streets and roads. And within that 80%, there's a 10% carve out that would be specifically applied to disadvantaged communities as defined by local economics and that sort of thing. It will not be tied necessarily to pavement condition because that changes some other things. But I can tell you that our representatives from Fairmead and from Lavina were very moved by the support that they got from the rest of the group. And it's not just Lavina and Fairmead, just so everybody's clear. There are places in every city all over the county that have felt like they weren't getting the love. And so this basically says that over the course of the measure, a total of 10% of that will go to those communities. And we felt that that was just a great, a really good outcome. Now that means it's got to come from someplace else. So yes, 14.5% is the money that would be set aside for regional projects. Now that is a lower amount than you may have seen in the past, but I'd like to remind the board that it also opens the door for a local agency, a city or a county to say, hey, you know what? A lot of our roads are regional roads. You could still make that money work both ways, right? But it depends on what you need. And then 4% would go to transit. Very interesting conversation because one of the things that came out of it was like, okay, we hear, and you're going to hear about unmet transit needs today. It's maybe not as feasible for additional routes or additional service lines to be implemented. However, the county has been looking at door-to-door service, van pools, other types of things. So that money could be used for those services as well. And the group thought that that was a really good idea. 1.5%, which is a 0.5% increase in administration. And this is specific. I would say that the Citizens Oversight Committee discussion was probably part of the most lively back and forth that I've been involved in for years. And let's just say that at the end of the day, they really want to have something that's more independent. And you'll see, for example, that the appointees will not come through this Board of Supervisors, but rather will be, as we did the committee, people will apply. It would be the COC chairman, a representative from the finance world here at MCTC or MCTA, and then a third party that they mutually agree upon. There would be 5 representatives, one from each supervisorial district and 1 alternative. They would be empowered to have their own independent auditor to overlook the books. So they have a third party that they can choose. But I think the most important thing is the idea of quarterly meetings. These are Brown Act meetings, but an annual report that is not just the line item of how much money went in here and went out here, but the specifics, which you see on the website now that said, these are the projects. These are the streets that got some love. This is what happened. So it's much more visual and much more accessible to the public. They also included the proviso that report would be made available in Spanish and in English so that it would be accessible to all of our residents. And this was, I mean, you'll see, because we're gonna be back next month with the entire measure, so you'll see the depth of it, but I just want to say there was a lot of thought that went into this and a lot of discussion and a lot of spirited discussion. So I will just say that every point that's in there was vetted and versed. Now, the thing that I thought was really humorous in a way is that you see the allocation of funds. I could not thank our colleagues and friends from both the city of Chowchilla, the city of Madera, and the county, specifically the city managers, county administrator, and staff, for attending the steering committee meetings, because we made it very clear to the steering committee, as an example, that both the city of Madera and the city of Chowchilla were not going to be supportive of a formula that got into road miles. And when that discussion was frankly held, it became clear that there should be an alternative, and that was where they came up with sales tax. However, after that discussion, when they realized that there could be changes in the way that businesses move, let's say from the county to the city of Madera or in general, and when the polling results came back and said people really didn't like that, the group wound back up with population, which I think made most of our jurisdictions very happy. But I think the interesting thing about it, and a little joke we had yesterday, is we're guessing that's the same conversation they had 20 years ago when they tried to figure this out, that they kept going back and forth, and that's it. So the other pieces, as I mentioned, that are interesting on this, of course, the Citizen Oversight Committee may not be an elected official that is not less than 3 years out of office, or a spouse, may not be a current or former employee of any of the member agencies, again, with less than 3 years out. Quarterly meetings, independent auditor, and then one of the things which I think was really smart, they want to have a COC chair to appear before this body on a quarterly basis as an agendized item to give an update. So now we're talking about the 4 meetings that the COC has, plus here at the MCTA meeting, plus that annual report, and these are all going towards the other pieces. So on May 13th, we are going to review the final copy, that all the edits that we made yesterday with the steering committee, after legal has also reviewed it. This will then be coming to this board as part of your agenda package. The draft will be provided to everyone, including all the member agencies, May 17th. And then May 29th, we'll be back here again to make that presentation and get a decision from this board on what you choose to move forward with. If you choose to move forward, then we're going to be going obviously to City of Madera on June 5th, June 11th to the County Board of Supervisors, June 11th also City of Chowchilla. And then because of the legal way this works, staff met with the registrar of voters and all with our legal team to make sure we didn't have anything rushed or missed. So in this case, we know we have to have 2 readings. So there will be a special meeting on June 12th that will hear the first reading of the measure. And then there'll be a second and final meeting to place it on the ballot on June 12th. And then it's our understanding that that will go before the Board of Supervisors on July 2nd. As Dave mentioned, can't emphasize this enough. We know from what we've been told that there is support in among the groups that perhaps were not as supportive before. Their biggest issue, frankly, is the makeup of this board. We made clear to them that was not something that could be changed by this board or changed by November. And staff worked with folks to prepare a response to that. We went over that again yesterday. And so you will hear the argument against at this point goes to what they're calling the third leg of the stool. So everybody seems to be on the same page with the length of the measure, the way the allocation is happening, and the division. There is no problem with that. We don't think there's going to really be opposition. And even with those folks from representing some of our disadvantaged communities, this is the first time a measure has actually carved out something for those communities. It would shock me if they did not support it. But that last piece is the part we're going to need. I can also not emphasize enough the importance it'll be for each one of you and your colleagues at both cities to actively get this information and to be vocal about how you perceive it and what things you would recommend to folks. And with that, I would be available to answer any questions you might have. Dave is still with us, or at least for the next 15 minutes. But again, I think this is incredible progress. I really do want to thank staff and all of the members of the steering committee. This was not an easy process. I know you kind of heard about this before, but we did not have any screaming yesterday. No one left crying. No one was asked to leave the room. So I feel really proud of the work that we've done together.
All right, thank you, Kendall. Do any commissioners have questions, comments?
I was just curious, usually I don't ask questions during the commissioners, but on the polling where it showed the 67% yes, it said definitely yes, probably yes. Is there like statistical data to say of the probably yes, how many of those actually translates to yes, since it seems like we're assuming yes votes for those?
So I'll have Dave answer that. That was on the initial question. So when the initial question comes out, that's 67. When they get the positive message, it's up to 72. Then we also generate what's called crosstabs, which are linking at each different demographic group. But Dave, do you want to address that a little bit better since you are the pollster?
Yeah, so the nature of the question is we first ask people if they'll vote yes or no. If they say they'll vote yes, we then follow up and definitely vote. Those who initially undecided, leaning in one direction or the other. So of those three categories, the definite yes, the probably yes, and the lean yes, the definites and the probables are relatively solid. And it's usually the case that you hang on to most of them if you've got a reasonable amount of public education to let people know what the measure is about. And together, that's 63% of the vote. The additional 3% comes from those who are undecided but leaning yes. And that's a critical 3%. We need to get that in order to get to 2/3. But that group is much more tenuous, but it is also much, much smaller. So I will say the general dynamic is if you have a solid public education effort and you don't have very loud and well-funded opposition, you can hang on to most of that initial yes vote. What's harder is converting some of those undecideds. The poll shows we have the ability to do that, but that is a harder task than just firming up the yes votes we start with.
Well, that's helpful. That was a parent, my probably parent is 50-50, that's what I was asking.
If I might, I think the thing that's interesting, this go around and perhaps in 2022, our fundamental crux here is going to be the argument on the makeup of the board. That's where we've got the education that has to go forward. Also, we have to be clear that it is not a new tax. I think people know that. Even as we've been out talking with people, and quite a few, in fact, many of you know, you were at those meetings, friends said, oh, I didn't know, I thought it passed. They don't know. So up until this point, the effort has been to develop the measure, right? To develop what people are gonna want. Now we have a measure. So now there's a second phase that has to be discussed about moving forward. So two separate Joes on that. So just for clarification.
Do we have any public comment?
No question. It seems to me, I could be wrong. I could be remembering wrong. That
You'll have to go to the podium for the, thank you.
yeah, let's go with that part. I could be wrong, but I remember how I remember it when they were discussing the Measure D before when it didn't pass. That it was a little bit more than like 0.5% more than from the 26th. Could I be remembering wrong? Because I think a lot of people perceived it that way. And that could be part of our problem.
Yeah, this is a renewal, so no new added tax. So no new 0.5%. It just continues on with the current 0.5%.
That's a good point. Thanks.
Anyone else? Anyone online?
No hands are currently raised and, oh, actually, I just got one. Leadership Council, you're unmuted and free to speak.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. My name's Andrea Uribe, and I'm a policy advocate for Leadership Council, and I often work with community groups in Lavina and Fairmead. And I just had a follow-up question. Are there any estimates of how much of the current measure goes to unincorporated communities? I know that currently the set aside would be for 10%. Is there any set of numbers that we can compare to, like how much goes to disadvantaged and unincorporated communities right now with this current measure?
There is no set aside in the current measure, and there hasn't been one. So this is the first time there's actually been a specific set aside, which I think really makes it of note. So as an example, I think if my memory is correctly, it's $330 million that goes to local streets and roads. And of that, 33 million would go to those areas that are disadvantaged. I do want to be clear, though, it's not just the unincorporated county. There are areas in the city of Madera and the city of Chowchilla that could also be classified as disadvantaged. But this is the first time a set aside has been specifically detailed and would be tracked by the Citizen Oversight Committee to make sure that they actually get those funds.
Yes, thank you, Kendall. I'm very excited to see the set aside included in the measure. I think I'm just trying to see if there's a comparison of how much is currently being spent on disadvantaged and unincorporated communities to how much the 10% would be.
Well, just as an example, in the last 7 years, if I'm not mistaken, it's on the website on the question thing. Fairmead asked a very specific question about how much money had been spent there. And I want to say it was $500,000 over a 7-year period, but Jared, is that right? I saw Jared or someplace.
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah, about 500,000. So if you think about that over 7 years and now this being a 20-year measure, it is a substantially higher amount of money. I don't know that we have the ability right now to give you the specifics for all the areas. But again, I would just reiterate that there's never been a specific set aside before. This is unique and was something that was fought for very hard by the representatives from those communities and also frankly representatives from District 5 as well. So they're very proud of what they came up with.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, I'll now close public comment and I'll bring it back to the commission. I believe it's just a
This is an informational.
informational.
It's much more about that.
Okay, thank you, Kendall. Thank you. Dan,
Dave,
Dave,
Dave Metz.
sorry. Okay, we are going to come back to MCTC sitting as the Transportation Policy Committee, item 4, transportation consent items. Any commissioners wishing to pull or discuss the items on consent? Hearing none. I will now ask for public comment.
We have not received any and no hands are raised currently.
I believe we have someone in the audience. Come on up for,
This is the unmet needs.
we're on consent right now, so we're about to, we'll be there shortly.
Okay.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You guys have it. Item 5, transportation action discussion items. Item 5A, public hearing 2024-2025 unmet transit needs. We will have a presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. As we mentioned before, we have utilized interpreting services for this. For this item in particular, so there may have been some who may have joined the meeting late, and so we'd like Christina from Linguistica Interpreting and Translation to provide instructions again in Spanish.
Hola, estamos dando un anuncio de nuevo por si acaso que alguien se conectó tarde. Estamos proveyendo interpretación simultánea esta tarde y para poder conectarse mediante el Zoom, si está conectado desde una computadora, van a ver el icono del mundo en la parte inferior de la pantalla que dice interpretación. Seleccione su idioma de preferencia, que en este caso será el español, y luego de clic a silenciar audio original. Y ya de ahí finalicen y estarán conectados a la interpretación para poder también participar en el comentario público.
All right, thank you. Okay, so next slide. So before we begin the public hearing, we want to briefly discuss what the purpose is for this hearing and the opportunities that have been made available for public participation in addressing unmet transit needs. And then finally, we'll explain how individuals who are here today can participate in the hearing. Next slide, please. So in order to understand the purpose of this public hearing, we need to trace back to where the unmet transit needs process began. And that's with the Transportation Development Act. The Transportation Development Act, or TDA for short, it was enacted in 1971, and it was to provide funding for two main objectives. One of them was to improve public transit, and the second was to encourage regional collaboration on public transit issues. So the TDA provides two funding sources. One of them is the Local Transportation Fund, and which is derived from a 1/4 cent of the general sales tax collected statewide, and the State Transit Assistance Fund, which comes from the statewide sales tax on diesel fuel. So MCTC's responsibility as a regional transportation planning agency is to disperse those funds to the local transit agencies, and then also to ensure that this unmet transit needs process is conducted. So in line with the intent of the funding, then those transit agencies use those funds to improve their transit systems. But because Madera County has a population of under 500,000 people, we also have the provision to use these funds for non-transit purposes, such as for street and road maintenance. Next slide, please. So a key component of the Transportation Development Act is public participation. Regional planning agencies like MCTC are required to establish a Social Services Transportation Advisory Council to discuss transportation needs and also to hear the concerns of those who are transit dependent or who are disadvantaged. So the council is made up of transit riders, persons with disabilities, social service representatives, seniors, and also representatives from the local transit agencies. One of the main functions of the SSTAC is to evaluate public transit requests and then determine, one, are they an unmet transit need? And then two, are they reasonable to meet? So annually, that council will make a recommendation to this policy board regarding unmet transit service needs. So after all reasonable needs have been met, whether it be from expanding existing service or maybe creating new transit systems, then MCTC can release those remaining TDA funds for non-transit uses, such as for street and road maintenance. So you might ask, well, is establishing an SSTAC and inviting the public to comment on transit service needs optional, or is it mandatory? Well, as you probably guess, and as you may know, it is a mandatory process. Having a process where the public can participate and provide input on transit service needs is a condition to receiving these TDA funds. So the law requires that annually there be at least one public hearing to receive public input. And so that's why we're here today. Next slide, please. So even though the law requires only one public hearing per year, we go beyond that. We try to make it easy for residents to submit comments in the way that's the most convenient for them. We'll take comments by phone, mail, email, comment forms. We have an online survey. And during the month of March, we hosted several workshops throughout the county to provide opportunities for residents to learn about the unmet transit needs process and also to get assistance in filling out those comment forms if they needed it. So we had in-person workshops at the communities of Lavinia and North Fork. We also had workshops in the city of Chowchilla. In the city of Madera, we went to the Frank Bergen Senior Center and also the county library. And also for those who preferred it, we had a virtual option as well. So next slide, please. So here's a timeline of the unmet transit needs process for this year. We started the unmet transit needs process in February. And as I detailed before on the last slide, we had several workshops in March. And then here we are today where the little arrows are pointing. We're here at the public hearing. On April 30th, then the SSTAC will review all the comments received, and they will make a recommendation to the MCTC Policy Board if any unmet transit needs were identified, and if so, if they're reasonable to meet. So this policy board will make the final decision on the unmet transit needs at the May Policy Board meeting on May 29th. And then it's all compiled into a report and sent off to the state for documentation. So then after that, the transit agencies will begin to find a solution for the unmet transit needs that were identified through this process as reasonable to meet. Next slide, please. So if you are here today to participate in the public hearing, we really look forward to your comments. When it's your turn to speak, please introduce yourself, state your name and your city or community of residence for the record. You'll have about 3 minutes to speak, but try to give as much detail as possible. The more specifics that you can share about your specific service needs, from where to or how often, the easier it will be for the SSTAC and the policy board to understand and evaluate the needs you're addressing. So with that, I'll turn the meeting back over to you, Madam Chair, and to open it up for public comment.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing. Do we have any public comment? Come on up now.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Ortegon. I'm with the City of Madera Transportation Advisory Board. I'm the chair. I'm also on the City of Madera ADA Advisory Board since 2006. I'm disabled and I come to meetings, and I'm glad that this meeting is at 3 o'clock, because if I have meeting at 5 o'clock or later, the Dial-A-Ride bus cannot pick me up and take me home because they stop picking up people at 5:30. So having meetings at a time when I know it's convenient for people who work and everything, but for the disabled community and seniors, it's hard to be able to schedule a ride meetings that are held later in the evening. I was recently at our last transportation advisory meeting in January. The city did a workshop on micro transportation, which is a door-to-door service where it'd be like an Uber. And I'm very excited about it. We've got about 14 months to get this program going, which is a short period of time because there's not a lot available in this area. There's not a lot of companies that have already established that work for the city like we would with the city. And I'm hoping that the county will also participate in this so that the county people who live up in the mountains and need to come down the mountains for services have a faster and more efficient ride. One of the things I found out doing some research on these micro projects, they had a pilot program in LA. And in LA, they were charging each rider $1 per ride. And the city was paying $47 to that company for each ride. That was a lot of money. And I know I know there's negotiations and stuff to be able to get that number down, but that came to about, for the amount of people who took the Madera Metro last year was about 68,000, and you times that by 47, I got around $2 million más o menos for that, and that's a lot of money. And Madera's a little town, you know, we don't have that many people, we don't have that much stuff, but transportation is very important for everybody in the town and the city and the county especially. I go by where the county buses are parked on Almond, and I like to wave to the drivers there. The drivers are really nice, and I was concerned for them because it didn't look like they had a place to go inside and sit. And, get out of the sun. Their buses are sitting there in the heat, just, getting hot. Then I found out, I went into the building and I found out they do have they're making a nice area for them to use the restrooms, get out of the sun and stuff, even though their vans are sitting out in the sun. There's no cover from the rain, from weather or anything. And I know that also if we do incorporate this micro transit program, the Uber, that we need to install charging stations, solar farms, wind farms, something to generate that energy. So it's not so costly to the city and the county. That's something we need to get going on if we've got 14 months to do this. So I'd like to really encourage the city and the county to work together on this program so that we have better transportation in the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any other public comments? We have some online.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again. It's Andrea Uribe from Leadership Council again. And I just wanted to say thank you for the workshop that was hosted in Lavina on March 1st. I know a lot of community members had the opportunity to talk about their unmet needs there. And I just wanted to highlight some of the things that community members had talked about during that day. I think one of the biggest things that came up in conversation was safety. And I know one of the questions from the survey was, do you feel safe using transit? And I'll just share a little excerpt from the meeting. At first, most of the residents said, yes, we feel safe riding the bus. And because residents were thinking mainly of their safety within the bus, within like their route from stop A to stop B. Then we started talking about what it takes to get on the bus and make it back home, and the conversation shifted. Residents brought up that they would like to have lighting at bus stops and from the pathways from their homes up to the bus stop so that they could feel safe on their way to the bus stops. Additionally, one of the residents there, Doña Esther, shared a story of a time where one of her doctor's appointments ran late and she missed her bus back to Lavina. And similar to what the person before me just said, there were no other bus stops that ran after that set time. And Doña Esther also uses an electric wheelchair to get along. And because of this, she wasn't able to just pick up anybody. She wasn't able to just call a random taxi because she didn't know if they would be able to accommodate for her wheelchair. And then she also talked about how reception was spotty and she couldn't just call an Uber or a Lyft because of reception, not having consistent access to data. And she wasn't sure if all of these options would be ADA compliant. So I just wanted to point out that sometimes it's not that residents are feeling scared or unsafe using public transit while they're on the bus, but that they were scared to be stranded if they relied on the bus. And I think this also just discouraged people from using the bus in general, and makes it seem like the necessity for public transport maybe isn't as needed in Lavina because maybe the numbers of people using the bus aren't as high. But I think it's just that sometimes people aren't able to use it as much because they're not able to run their errands or they're not able to feel ensured that they'll be able to have a ride back home. And I just want to reiterate that safety is important outside of the physical bus riding, and they need to feel safe while they're walking on their way to the bus stop, while they're bus stop, and they need to be able to feel like they'll be able to make it back home. With that being said, they also just rated the need for more infrastructure on the bus stops, like a trash can, maybe a way to light to show the bus schedule and whether the bus is showing up on time or if it's running late, and having additional route times and routes, and having the bus show up with more consistency. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another comment.
Dan, you have been unmuted and allowed to speak.
Thank you, Dan Metz from Oakhurst, representing Sierra Citizens. I'm not sure We have how much input you have had from the elderly and the disabled in the outlying areas such as Oakhurst. We have a terrific community here of the elderly and the people who need rides to medical appointments, including into Fresno primarily. And I don't know what you can do about providing services of that type. But I'm also curious, how much input have you received in total in your workshops, and how many people participated? And I'm also doubtful that you will have much input from the elderly or the disabled in the Eastern County and the outlying areas because of inability and without access to internet. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll now close public comment. Bring it back to the commissioners. And I'll close the public hearing. And I believe that's it. Nothing to do.
Yes, that's it for information discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Item 5B is the 2024 State Transportation Improvement Program. Adopted.
Yes, I'm happy to report back to you today that the California Transportation Commission at its March meeting approved several projects that were in the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program. And those are the 99 South, which is from Avenue 7 to Avenue 12. 99, and that's the added funding for construction. And then on 99, beginning the environmental on Avenue 17 to Avenue 21. And so that would be the environmental phase. So to kick that off and for public engagement as well, related to that section. And then also 80 million in for the transit, for the high-speed rail station. And so together, that's almost $90 million, which is a lot coming to Madera through the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program, which is state funded. I also wanted to share with you a YouTube video that was shared at the California Transportation Commission meeting. Chair Carl, you see that? Gardino. He is the incoming chair, so he's now the chair. Leanne Ager is no longer the chair, so she's past chair. And he wanted to share it since he felt like it was timely. And I wanted to share it because I thought it was well received from the group there, and he also encouraged us to share it along with other transportation planning agencies. Chair Gardino is a very passionate person. And so he basically wanted the group to know that there were some observations that he has been observing from past CTC meetings and throughout the state of California. And he's been on the California Transportation Commission for a number of years. And one was California diversity is our unity and our strength. And he said it's geographic diversity, it's cultural diversity, ethnic diversity, age diversity, and gender diversity. And so bringing people together with unique backgrounds allows us to chart a path forward or to bring projects forward for a better California. And then he also, another observation is there's a lot of discourse, especially at the federal level, and it is devolved. And he wanted to reiterate and share with the group that it should not be, and he hopes that it will not be, that way at the state, regional, and local level in California. And I'm just going to read a quote from him before we kind of go into this video, but and this is a quote, it is important that our diverse perspectives lead to robust conversations, debates, and even strongly held disagreements. But unlike at the federal level, it does not mean that when we attack issues that we should ever attack individuals or institutions or entities. We as a state and as a commission, and he's referring to the California Transportation Commission, are better than that. And so Chair Gardino also moved on to say that he's a partner and he's involved in the National Governors Association. And with the National Governors Association, their goal is unity and to make a better place to live and work. And their initiative this year is Disagree Better. So meaning to treat others with respect, listen, learn, and drive the state and country forward. So the chairs and the vice chair of the National Governors Association are always of different political party. And there's obviously a reason for that. This year's chair is Utah Governor Spencer Cox, and he's a committed conservative. And vice chair is Colorado Governor Jared Polis, and he's a committed liberal. And so together, these two individuals launched the Disagree Better campaign. And it's only a minute and a half or so. So, Sandy.
I'm Spencer Cox, Republican governor of Utah.
And I'm Jared Polis, Democratic governor of Colorado.
And we're here to help save your family dinners.
You know what we're talking about.
You're halfway through your second helping of mashed potatoes when your MAGA uncle decides to share his thoughts on the latest election conspiracy.
We all have that uncle.
Or instead of passing the salt, your woke niece passes along a particularly controversial fact that she read on social media.
Or maybe you're the one with the strong opinions. You know you're right, and the other side is a bunch of misguided weirdos. But there's a healthy way to deal with conflicting opinions. Actually, it's okay to disagree.
It's not just okay, it's crucial.
Did you just disagree with me about disagreeing?
Healthy disagreement means not assuming that the other side is deluded, misinformed, or actively trying to overthrow America.
A little respect and curiosity keeps resentment off the dinner table.
And out of your social media feeds.
Our nation was founded by people who profoundly disagreed.
So next time your uncle, your niece, or anyone else brings up that one topic that just drives you nuts, take a deep breath.
Be curious, ask questions. If you still disagree, that's okay, but you might find that you aren't as far apart as you think.
Conflict isn't bad. It's the way we disagree that matters. Please join us in showing America the right kind of conflict.
Together,
we can disagree better.
Starting to get emotional just thinking.
It's okay to disagree. This item was for discussion only.
And any comments from commissioners? Any public comment on this item? Online? Any public comment online? No. Okay. Okay, we will move on to item 5C, Calvan's Legislative Day recap.
Yeah, we had a Calvan's Legislative Day on April 11th. Commissioner Poitras is a member of the Calvan's board, and so joined us at I joined the elected officials at the lobby day. So Calvan's, and we heard a report from Calvan's, I think almost a year ago. Georgina made a presentation. The Calvan's is a joint powers authority, and their mission is to get people safely to work, and mainly they're the farm workers, labor workers, but there's also the prison workers, and maybe we hope we can expand it to other types of workers to larger type of employment jobs. But the goal of the lobby trip, and Commissioner Poitras can chime in and share his experience, was basically to educate some senators and our representatives, our legislative representatives on what Calvan's is and what our ask was or is, and educate them because a lot of people in our state of California are not aware of Calvan's, and they do not know that this service exists. And the ask this year, though, was because they have to transition to an EVs. Their EVs are not made for these types of vans, and so they usually have to get a cargo van and kind of retrofit them so that they could provide the service. Abiding by the legislation. So the ask was to include some additional state funding to the Calvans to do this and also to recognize that maybe in the climate, if there's going to be a climate bill, that they set aside some funding, or at least allow for funding available to CalVans. CalVans is not an agency that is eligible to receive some of the funding that our transit agencies are able to receive. And so they have to either go after competitive grants if they qualify for competitive grants. So they're looking for some sort of carve out if there is going to be some sort of climate initiative on the ballot. But with that, you were highly involved. You were a speaker involved in the lobby trip and have been a member of CalVans for a number of years. I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to share. And we just wanted to bring it back to you to share with you.
Yeah, I'd like to. Thank you. I serve as not only a commissioner, but I'm also the vice chair, and rumor is I'll be chair starting in May. So I think I have one of those jerseys that say sucker on the back of it where my last name is supposed to be. But no, it's a great honor to be part of this organization. And, you know, unfortunately, it shows where state law and some of the aspirational goals of the California Air Resources Board has outstripped technology. So next year, starting in, CalVan's 10% of the fleet is supposed to be electric.
Yeah.
And, okay, so 10% is supposed to be electric. We're talking about 1,000 vans. So 100 have to be electric. And guess what? We have to retrofit every single van because they don't make vans under this category. So you have to buy the van and retrofit. And so each van costs around $200,000 to do this with. So it just shows you the disconnect with, you know, one state agency and another agency that's going on. So it's really, really sad. So that's the reason that we're advocating for this funding. But think about the core mission of CalVans. Can anybody tell me what happened out on Avenue 7 in late February? Yeah, 8 people lost their lives. For those of you who don't remember, and maybe I jogged your memory, 7 farm workers. None of them were wearing seatbelts. They were not riding in a CalVans van. In a CalVans van, you're required to wear seatbelts. The driver is required to ensure that the passengers are wearing seatbelts. I was talking to a CHP officer who was on the scene. It was very tragic. He said that the bodies were all strewn around. None of them were wearing seatbelts, and they were all ejected. Now, I don't know what would have happened if they were wearing seatbelts. It was a head-on collision, but certainly they would not have been ejected from those vehicles. CalVans has never had a fatality in all the years that it's going. So not only is this it's a humanitarian effort, and it's something that not only is for humanitarian purposes, but it's something that helps our economy. It gets farm workers safely to places where they can earn funding and have our food force. Can you imagine if 100 of these vans are not allowed to be on the road? That's 100 times what I think they carry, like 13 or 14 people or something like that. So
We rode in.
yeah, we rode in one, exactly. And so there'd be that many people who could not make it safely to a field for their jobs and for their livelihoods and for food production and taking food to our table. So that's the reason I'm involved, and I'm very proud to be involved. And it's something that Madera County residents, we need to ensure that they have safe transportation to their places of work. And it goes beyond field workers. It's something that can be used for other types of applications. I think that there's some CalVans that are utilized for prison employees to ride to and from work. So that's what it is in a nutshell. And we're going to continue to lobby for this important funding so that we can, again, humanitarian purposes and make our roads safer. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I also have a comment. I had the privilege to attend one of these lobby days as an alternate for Supervisor Poitras. And again, it kind of opened my eyes a bit about what CalVans is. But, it's not heavily utilized here in Madera County as it is down south. But to your point, it does provide a safety net for a lot of these folks that travel, especially in the ag field. You know, when I was younger and I attended high school, my summers were out working. And I remember working in mainly benches is where you sat when you took a ride through these vans. And that's where the safety component comes in. But, you know, there was another comment that was made from the gentleman out at the Northeast Madera County. That, you know, people can find ways to utilize these van pools to come down to certain meetings. I know there was a discussion about seniors and what have you, but we don't utilize these particular benefits that we have here in the community. It's not only for people that work in ag, you said it, it's for people that are in corrections. It could be a pool of teachers, it could be a pool of anything. So as long as you get more vehicles off the street, reduces emissions, and I think that's one of the goals that they want to see. But I mean, in Madera County, you know, when I brought it back to council as a report, you know, it's like, it's out there. We can take advantage of it. We just don't spread the word out there. And I know there's a lot of folks that are, the one component that I took from it is that it's free of charge to the rider. So that's kind of amazing. They work something out between the employer and Calvans, but there's no charge to the borrower. And a lot of the times when these folks are out there working, it's a $5 a day to $10 a day. So that takes from them. So when you put that out at the end of the day, at the end of the week, it's quite a bit of money. But here it's an opportunity. So if there's any contractors, any laborers, or any farms out there that need to utilize that, this is the way to go. And so I think it's you know, the component about the EVs, I do understand that. There's just not enough infrastructure to carry these vans for long distances. So I think that's another thing that was important at the time. So anyhow, if you know of anyone that's looking to take advantage of it, reach out to Robert or Patricia, and we can certainly guide you to that path.
As a matter of fact, you know, regarding the distance for the Calvins, weren't they purchasing, was that an action on your board? So
They had these gigantic electric generators and they were like $650,000 each. And they were literally 20,000 pounds. And they had to be carried on these low boys out to the field so they could be charged out in certain locations in the field. So not only did they get out, but they can make it back because they don't have the range, you know, so, but yeah, 650,000 pounds. Can you imagine 20,000 pounds? That's, you know, 10 tons. That's a lot of weight.
Thank you for that, Emily. Any, do we have any?
Charges using fuel?
Right, I don't know, you know,
Diesel or-
that's a good question. Yeah. Right. Probably
I
is
believe we have some public comment.
Yeah, just one comment. Appreciate the Calvin's conversation. I know we're talking about 99 next, but we're using the VMT mitigation strategy for artillery projects. And so for that one, I think over the first 2 years, we're implementing, we're gonna buy 30 vans. I think we're gonna subsidize 30 vans the first year, 15 the next. I think the VMT savings projected to be about 6.5 million vehicle miles traveled over the year. So that in correlation with the truck only lanes, we're able to essentially offset the VMT impact. So it's just something to think about. We start kicking off environmental work for the 99 North project. And we'll have to come up with some kind of VMT strategy. And that's been successful for us doing establishing new transit lines or frequencies, and then the Calvans tool can come in handy. I think we use it for Chowchilla as well to fully offset.
Right. In fact, other counties are now, or agencies, I think MPOs and so forth, are looking at Calvans for that mitigation. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any public comment online? Okay, thank you very much. Item 5D is State Route 99 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan Update.
Thank you. So yes, the State Route 99 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan, we're gonna call that CMCP from here on out. So it'll save us about 5 minutes. But yeah, I just want to update you on what's happening with that plan. It is a fairly large plan. It is going to be a 2-year plan headed by the state, multiple districts. It's to identify a broad range of multimodal opportunities for improvements and enhancing the corridor and developing a stakeholder shared vision for implementing projects. The project extends to the north to the US 50 interchange at State Route 99, all the way to the south at the I-5 Wheeler Ridge interchange in Kern County. So it encompasses multiple Caltrans districts, many counties, a lot of cities as well. So this plan builds on a lot of work that's already been done. It's not something that's newly created. There has been the 2005 State Route 99 business plan. The key component of that plan was to take a strategic approach to transforming State Route 99 into a safe and efficient corridor. And there was a big emphasis on trade as well. One of the key goals in that was actually to convert State Route 99 into a contiguous 6-lane facility throughout the San Joaquin Valley. Where we're at today is there are 35 miles across 8 different segments in Merced, Madera, and Tulare County that have not yet reached that 6-lane configuration. So this plan also builds on, well, the business plan was updated in 2020 and 2013, so it continues to build on that. There's also quite a few transportation concept reports. There's corridor system management plans, district system management plans. There's a lot of work that combines many pieces into one very large comprehensive project for this. Additionally, there are some newer plans, and we were just discussing this at the state level, that really have focused on how we address investment towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the VMT that's responsible for creating greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles. So this plan will strive to align with the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, otherwise known as CAPTI, the California Transportation Plan 2050 that's prepared by California State Transportation Authority, and the California Strategic Investment Strategy, which is a guide and recommendations for investments on how the state can meet their ambitious climate goals. These all build upon some executive orders from our governor that are very much aligned with a lot of the plans we do. Executive Order in 1919, which is about funding to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in transportation, and Executive Order in 9720, which directs Cal STA to identify near-term actions to improve clean transportation, sustainable freight, and transit options while adhering to a fix-it-first approach for California's transportation systems. So there's a lot to work with, a lot to build upon from all these different sources for this comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. So we mentioned there's 3 districts. A lot of times when we do a San Joaquin Valley plan, there's 2. There's District 6 and 10, which is our usual 8 counties. District 3 is also involved with this because we go up into Sacramento. With that, there's also 8 MPOs involved. Where usually Kings County is with us. King County actually doesn't run or have State Route 99 run through it. So we've swapped them with SACOG, Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Also, the development team for this, as I mentioned, will be working with quite a few city and county agencies, as you know, 99 runs through so many communities in the valley. So Caltrans has retained the technical professional services of Jacobs Solutions. They're going to be the lead consultant on this. They have 6 primary tasks they're working on. Currently, they're involved in 3 primary tasks. Their first task is just project management and administration. They're currently working on task 2 through 4, which is data assessment and collection. Task 3 is related to public outreach and how they engage with the reader. And then task 4 is their technical baseline performance and identification of strategies, as well as analysis of the strategies they identify. Going back to task 3, they're just about ready to roll out some of what they've accomplished in task 2, 3, and 4, and they're going to be having a series of public workshops in 8 different counties, Madera included. And I think we are tentatively scheduled for June 12th in the evening. That's a Wednesday for a Madera County meeting. I don't have all the details on that yet, but we will provide all the details, and we're providing them information as far as our contact list. So we can get anyone that's interested in this to participate in that and be able to see what they have to roll out related to what it is they've already accomplished. There will be another round of workshops throughout all the counties this winter as well. So we have been, Patricia participates with them at the executive level, and I'm MPO staff working with them, giving them some information as well. Where they are looking at all of our RTPs, our project lists, everything they can, not just the state plans, but local and regional plans as well. That'll help inform the decisions that are made and the recommendations that come out of this plan. And those recommendations can be very important. That we mentioned our 99 South project. Its funding is contingent upon completion of the CMCP. So there's a lot of important vital aspects of that plan that are really going to shape the future of this corridor throughout the San Joaquin Valley. With that being said, we did have our friends from District 6. If there was anything they wanted to add, we'd love to get your perspective as well.
Thank you, thank you. And I think, thank you, Dylan. Dylan gave a lot of detail, probably stole a lot of Alex thunder, but real quick, I think we're a lot of different places we were thinking about video about conflict. There was different visions for 99. I think we've come a long ways in getting buy-in on finishing 99. And so, as Dylan mentioned, one of the conditions for the Avenue 7 to 12 ITIP funding that's been secured already was first we had to do the 99 Summit, which we had out the Ag Center back in 2021. And then the other component was having this 99 comprehensive multimodal corridor plan complete prior to the allocation for construction funding, which it will be done. We'll have this schedule to be done in June. I brought someone much smarter than me, Alec Kimmel. I don't know about Alec, you might come up and fill in some of the gaps. If there's anything you want to add that Dylan maybe didn't cover, but Alec Kimmel, he was instrumental in getting us the grant to do this study. As mentioned, we've never done a study across 3 districts. We got about $1.4 million. So Alec worked on the deliverables, writing the application. So very lucky to have him put that together for us to secure that funding. And essentially District 6 has been taking the lead on this application, even though we're working with 10 and 3. So Alec has been our project manager for this, coordinating with and working very directly with Jacob. So, so Alec, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add or.
I'll add a little bit. Thank you so much, Dylan, for your overview, and thank you everyone on the board and in the audience and at MCTC. I'll be able to be a little bit briefer than I expected, but just highlighting some major accomplishments. Right now, we're, as you heard, about a third of the way through the 2-year effort with Jacobs in the lead and also sub-consultants helping out. We have a video in development that's going to be sent out to advertise for the public engagement. And we are moving forward with being able to gather input from that public engagement to help at the same time concurrent with the analysis that the consultant team will be doing. I just want to say that in terms of a major accomplishment related more to projects, I wanted to thank all of you because it really is an indicator of how we can be more successful together, not just in terms of meeting the requirement of the 2022 ITIP to have a CMCP that is done with the districts in partnership with the MPO agencies, but also the MPO agencies in partnership with each other. Michael briefly mentioned the Tulare project in 99. A requirement of that project, also related to the mitigation that's being done with CalVans, is also looking at how we can find VMT reductions, vehicle mile travel reductions, through the analysis being done by the corridor plan. And we were required to provide a set of preliminary recommendations as part of the environmental document for that project in Tulare. And our consultant did that by the target deadline. That said, those recommendations are still preliminary. They will still be informed by the public engagement and by the analysis. And so we're looking forward. We really appreciate all the participation, all of the help. We will be looking to you as, I don't know if Dylan had mentioned this, but we will be looking to all the MPOs to be able to help us put the word out and provide any sort of contacts that the consultant can use to outreach to the communities, to other stakeholders. That's it.
Any questions?
When was the report supposed to be completed?
So the condition with the ITIP was to align with the construction allocation, which is actually fall of 2025 for that project. But this contract we'll have probably a draft. I'm thinking like spring. I'm thinking like April-ish, and then they have to close out the contract by June 30th of next year. the fiscal year is what's required to be complete. So we have a cushion before the construction allocation for.
So does the content of the report have any bearing on whether the things go forward, or they just have to have a report? Is it something they go, oh, okay, check, and they put on a shelf? What's the?
So the projects we're doing now, Madera was first. That was kind of on the threshold of SB 743. So that's a done deal. We're building the general purpose lanes. The discussion we've had with headquarters, and I think you've heard the director talk at CTC meetings, was completing those gaps allows us to implement the recommendations out of this corridor plan. Like when you look at managed lane strategy, you can't do that when you have 4-mile sections on 99 still. So it has no bearing on the 7 to 12 project, other than getting the comprehensive corridor plan complete. Obviously it's expected we will have, managed lane recommendations. We're looking at multimodal parallel corridors, things of that nature. And it will drive probably decision-making as we go through kick off the other segments, like the north segment, on how we put that project together, because we'll theoretically have recommendations done, doing the environmental process. And I'm hoping it makes us more competitive when we go after like TCEP funding, because now that we'll have continuous 6 lanes from city of Tulare, essentially all the way through Madera, we could probably start we could put out applications that show the conversion to truck lanes or whatever strategies that come out of that, which I think will make it much more competitive versus the general purpose lanes.
Thank you. I heard you say June, but I didn't know what June.
Right, June 2025.
And one more thing I'd just like to add, which is that this engagement coming up is essentially round 1 of a 2-part engagement. The second part will be a follow-up after the analysis has been done to sort of get consensus on the recommended strategies. Well, all that's in 2024.
Thank you very much. I'll now open it up to public comment. No public comment. Thank you for that. We will now move to MCTC sitting as the Madera County Transportation Commission. Item 6, reaffirm all actions taken while sitting as the Transportation Policy Committee.
So move.
Second. We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 7, administrative consent items. Questions, comments, public comment?
I'll second.
A first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 8, administrative action items. Fiscal year 2024-2025 overall work program and line item budget.
Yes, included in your package, actually, a link to our website is the overall work program. The overall work program, we did discuss at a certain level on, I think it was our February meeting, or was it March? February meeting. And at that time, the document was draft. We requested that we circulate the draft for comments. We circulated the draft for comments and from our partners, and our partners provided us with various comments, which we incorporated into the document, most of which were just clarifying language and separating out certain work elements to make it a little bit more clear, and adjusting some of the funding for our environmental impact report that we anticipate completing. But the document before you includes all of our proposed work activities for fiscal year 2024-2025, and outlines the tasks associated to it. There are some status quo items that we are required to do every year, which we are also included in this work element. In this work plan. And what will be a lot of effort and work will be related to the regional transportation plan. It will be like a 3-year process, and our sustainable community strategy. We will be kicking that off. There will be some public engagement activities, public workshops, and some analysis with and updating our model and completing our current CS that we have circulated. We're going to be cooperating with the county on the Oakhurst multimodal corridor study. County's the lead on that study. and Caltrans is also a partner. The active transportation plan was last updated in 2018. We anticipate updating the active transportation plan. Finalizing our federal transportation improvement program for 2025 finalized, which is a programming document. Continuing our work with our GIS and making some improvements to our GIS. Continuing public outreach efforts and community events. If you hear of any community events or outreach efforts that you think that we should be attending, please let us know. We are more than happy to attend those and provide any kind of information related to the work that we do. Continuation of the Madera renewal for Measure D. Any kind of public education, public outreach, if the board chooses to move forward. Even if not, we continue to move forward with any kind of public education related to the Measure T program and projects. The budget is in your Appendix B, and the budget does show a decrease of 6% from the current budget this year, and that's due to consultant activities. It is a budget, it's a draft, it will be amended. It'll be amended several times next fiscal year to either add or delete funding from the program or add projects or make changes necessary. And so this item is before you today for approval, and we will be, once it's approved, signing all the certifications and assurances and sending it off to the state of California for final approval. And then that starts the process and releasing a grant funding. So this is pretty much a grant application package.
Have any questions or comments from the commissioners? Do we have any public comment on this item? None, we'll bring it back.
Move to approval. Second.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 8B is the triennial performance audit.
Good afternoon, commissioners. This item is to accept the triennial performance audits of MCTC, the County of Madera, the City of Madera, and the City of Chowchilla. MCTC is statutorily required by the Public Utilities Code to conduct every 3 years a performance audit of its activities and the activities of each operator to whom it allocates Transportation Development Act funds. The audit covered fiscal years 2020-21 through 2022-23 and audited the following functions: the RTPA administration and management, transportation planning and regional coordination, claimant relationships and oversight, follow-up of prior performance audit recommendations, marketing and transportation alternatives, and grant applications and management. MCTC retained Moore & Associates to conduct the performance audits. Kathy Chambers of Moore & Associates joins us online and is available for any questions. The main compliance finding and related recommendations revolve around the timeliness of the completion of the TDA compliance audits. We have struggled with this requirement for many years. This past year, MCTC staff worked with the local agencies to develop a plan to ensure the timeliness of these audits. We are optimistic that the future performance audits will indicate compliance with established timeframes. In addition to the compliance findings, there were some operator functional findings regarding consistent reporting, communication between departments, and CHP terminal inspections. We are working with the transit operators to address these findings with their related recommendations. I will now give some time to Kathy to add any additional information as needed. We are also available for any questions staff asks for acceptance of the audits. Kathy?
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. I just have a few comments. We were pleased to have the opportunity to work with the Madera County Transportation Commission and its 3 transit operators once again in the preparation of the triennial performance audits for this cycle. The MCTC's audit contained just 2 findings. Both were related to on-time completion of the required reports. These were both ranked as a low priority in the audit because the factors that led to the late submittals had already been addressed. As a result, it was no longer an issue by the end of the triennial period. We had to include it because it had been an issue during the triennial period, but they'd already been resolved. The transit operators, as mentioned, struggled with some of the same issues, but they are also in the process of being addressed. I'm happy to say that the majority of the findings and recommendations for the operators are administrative in nature and should be pretty straightforward to implement. In addition, MCTC has recently incorporated a progress report regarding triennial performance audit findings into its TDA claims process, which is expected to better facilitate oversight and implementation of the recommendations. And that's really all I had, so thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Do we have any? Oh. Do we have any public comment? No. Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back. An action item.
Second?
First and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on, we will now go to items from staff.
Yes, I do have an item. Earlier you were, received a presentation from Kendall for Measure T. And in her PowerPoint, she outlined that June 12th will be a special meeting for the Measure T of, and it will be for the authority only, not the commission. And it will be a reading of the ordinance. Wait, is it a reading of the ordinance? Yeah, okay, I'm just going off of memory. So I thought, oh, okay. Yes, so a reading of the ordinance. So the first reading. And so this will be a special meeting. We will send you an e-bite or an invite, calendar invite, so that it appears on your calendar. That same day, Dylan mentioned that there's that workshop potentially also for the CMCP. In addition, just as an added note, and you should already have it on your calendars, we have moved the May meeting to May 29th. And so that was said, I think a couple months ago, but just as a reminder, it's May 29th. That's all I have today.
Thank you for that. Items from
There is one other one. Happy Administrative Day to Sandy.
Thank you. Items from Kelly.
Where's the cake?
She the one gets the cake.
Oh.
Thank you very much, Chair. May 29th doesn't work for me. I was checking my calendar for board.
What's that?
May 29th doesn't work for me for board in that month. Awkward.
Okay, we'll
Just kidding. I'm just
agree.
kidding.
It's agree.
You gotta move it.
Joking, just joking.
June 12th doesn't work for me either.
Yeah. So a couple of quick updates. So we're preparing for our annual Caltrans Worker Memorial. So this year's theme is Everyday Heroes Remembered Every Day. So April 25th, they'll be having a large memorial at the steps of the Capitol. And then District 6, we always host a memorial as well, which is going to be on May 8th. Typically, we've done one in Fresno and one in Bakersfield. This year, we're just doing one smack dab in the middle in Visalia. But just do it to honor the 191 men and women who lost their lives working for Caltrans, which is obviously 191 too many. So put out the cones commemorating each individual with their names on it. So it's actually a really good event. Do want to share, it's a busy grant season. I'm sure your agencies are aware of that, but the Safe Streets for All program, they had one call for projects for April 4th, and now they have a second one on May 16th. These are for implementation grants and planning demonstration grants. If your agency is applying for one and would like a letter of support from Caltrans on or off system, we're happy to provide that for you. Also coming up is ATP Cycle 7, so deadline for those applications are June 17th. And then also for the multimodal project discretionary grant program, which is infra mega rural, that deadline is May 6th. I know Madera County's working on their application for the Madera 41 segment, and thank you, Jared, for supplying the intake form. So we are working on getting a letter of support from our director for the Madera 41 project. Also did want to share, so speaking of, we spoke about CAPTI a little bit earlier. CalSTA is having a listening session. It'll be virtual on May 1st and May 2nd. So CalSTA has been sending out invites to all the respective agencies. So encouraging your participation. It was discussed during the 9-9 conversation about the different components like CAPTI and CSIS and I-SCORE projects. So it's important to gather your input on those related items. We talked about Madera South project. That project still is in design. So obviously we're working to have that design completed and so that we can put that out for construction 2025. The North Madera 6-lane, this is that segment north of the city of Madera between Avenue 17 and Avenue 22. So as mentioned, that did have received ITIP funding. So we'll be having a kickoff meeting starting this summer of 2024 to get that environmental document started. So we'll be reaching out to the respective agencies along the corridor. The Madera downtown project, we've talked about, still in the same path. We're looking to have that design wrapped up by the end of this year and scheduled for a spring construction, which includes the road diet and the roundabouts, et cetera. Cottonwood Creek Bridge replacement. So it did a traffic shift just this past week. So the northbound traffic is shifted to the new temporary alignment and the northbound off ramp is closed. And the bridge to the ramp is demolished if you've driven past that recently. So that traffic switch will be in place for about 6 months. And then the new southbound bridge is open to traffic. So half of the bridge is being used for the southbound traffic and the other half for the northbound detour. We'll expect some delays going through there. That construction is supposed to be completed spring of next year, obviously weather depending. The good news is it will be complete in time for us to start construction theoretically, or start getting ready for construction on the segment for 99 from Avenue 7 to Avenue 12. So those won't be competing against one another. Work also continues with the Rancho rehab. There's some work going on the drainage out there, but the pavement work is in winter suspension. So the bridge work is complete and that project is scheduled to be completed on July 15th of this year. So that's the Rancho section of State Route 41 between Avenue 15 and 145. And then lastly, the Chowchilla pavement rehab project. We're going to be having an open house at the Chowchilla City Council chambers on April 24th. So that'll give the public an opportunity to comment on some of the, the project itself and some of the complete street features we're adding there. We plan on having environmental wrapped up on that project August of this year. That completes my update. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you for that. I'll now move to items from commissioners, starting with Commissioner Rodriguez.
All right, kind of like, thank you.
Commissioner Ahmed.
I just want to thank you for having an open house, which is tonight.
It's 24th already?
When is it?
Well, CPM project, so thank
So I'll
you.
head over after the meeting.
Commissioner Rogers,
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Gallegos.
Nothing to report.
Okay, well, with that, there's no closed session and we will stand adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, visual aid.